The RPG that killed Henderson landed 3 feet from where I was taking a piss behind a burned-out Toyota, and I knew immediately that someone had sold us out. Not because of the accuracy, though that rocket found our convoy with surgical precision. Not because of the timing, though they hit us at the exact moment we were most vulnerable, refueling in a valley that should have been secure. I knew because Lieutenant Morrison was the only one not surprised when the first explosion tore through. Our lead Humvee got while the rest of us scrambled for cover. While Henderson's blood painted the side of that Toyota, while Rodriguez screamed for his medic with half his leg blown off, Morrison just stood there, calm, watching, like he was waiting for something. The ambush lasted 14 minutes. 14 minutes of pure hell in the Kunar province, with Taliban fighters positioned on the high ground like they'd been studying our route for weeks. When the smoke cleared, 14 of my brothers were dead, and Morrison was already on his radio calling for medevac, his voice steady as a rock. "This is Bravo 6, he said into his handset. "We've got multiple KIA, need immediate extraction. Grid coordinates follow." He rattled off our position with machine-like precision, and I remember thinking it was strange how he knew exactly where we were without checking his GPS, almost like he'd memorized the spot. But you don't question your lieutenant in the middle of a firefight. You don't think about inconsistencies when you're loading body bags. You just follow orders and try to survive. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of nightmares, therapy sessions, and pills that don't quite kill the memories. 3 years of awe, wondering how the Taliban had known exactly when and where to hit us. 3 years of watching Morrison get promoted to captain, then major, his career advancing on the graves of better men than him. I might have lived with the questions forever if I hadn't gotten drunk last Tuesday night and decided to hack into Morrison's old email account. I'm good with computers, was an IT specialist before I enlisted. Morrison had always been careless with passwords, using his daughter's name and birthday for everything. Emma 2015. He'd never changed it, not even after rotation home. I told myself I was just curious, just looking for closure. Maybe some explanation for why our intel had been so wrong that day. But what I found in his deleted messages folder made my blood turned to ice. Emails, dozens of them, dating back 6 months before the ambush, all sent to an account I didn't recognize. j.halil@protonmail.com. The early messages were subtle. Requests for cultural consultation on patrol routes. Questions about local customs in specific villages. Payment offers for linguistic services. But as I scrolled deeper, the correspondence became more explicit. March 15, 2019, 11:47 p.m. from morrison.d.officer@us.army.mil to j.halil@protonmail.com. Consultation fee payment confirmed. $50,000 transferred to agreed account. Route information for next month's operations attached. Remember, timing is critical for authenticity. My hands shook as I opened the attachment. It was our patrol schedule. Every route, every checkpoint, every refuel stop we'd planned for the following month, including the valley where we'd been ambushed. I kept reading, my stomach churning with each message. Morrison hadn't just sold our coordinates. He'd sold us, all of us, for money. March 28, 2019, 2:15 a.m. from j.halil@protonmail.com to morrison.d.officer@us.army.mil. Final arrangements, everything in place. My people will be ready. Make sure your unit follows the route exactly. No deviations. The story must be believable. Unfortunate encounter with insurgents. You understand the importance of your survival for future operations. Your account will show an additional $75,000 after completion. future operations. Morrison had been planning to do this again. Would have done it again if our unit hadn't been so decimated that they pulled us back to base. I printed everything. Every email, every attachment, every piece of evidence that proved Morrison had murdered 14 American soldiers for money. Then I drove straight to the FBI field office in Denver, my hands still shaking, my mind reeling with the implications. Special Agent Sarah Kim listened to my story with professional calm, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she studied the emails for a long time before looking up at me. "Mr. Patterson, I need to ask you something important. How did you obtain these emails?" "I hacked into his account." "I know it was illegal, but that's a federal crime, computer fraud, potentially espionage, depending on the classification level of the information involved." "Are you kidding me?" "I just gave you proof that an Army major sold American soldiers to the Taliban." Agent Kim nodded slowly. "And we'll investigate every allegation thoroughly. But first, we need to address how this evidence was obtained. Illegally. Acquired evidence is inadmissible in court. So Morrison just gets away with it? 14 men are dead. Mr. Patterson, I understand your anger, but we have to follow proper procedures. I'm going to need you to come in for formal questioning, and I'm afraid I'll have to confiscate these documents as evidence." Something in her tone made my skin crawl. The way she said, "confiscate." The way she avoided my eyes when she mentioned following procedures. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked. Agent Kim was quiet for a moment. Then, "Major Morrison is currently assigned to the Pentagon. He works an intelligence liaison. His work involves cooperation with foreign governments on sensitive national security matters." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You're protecting him." "I'm not protecting anyone. But I am telling you that this is a very complex situation with national security implications. Making wild accusations against a decorated officer could be considered seditious conspiracy." "Wild accusations? I have his emails." "You have emails?" "Obtained through illegal means that could easily be fabricated. Without corroborating evidence, it's your word against a war hero." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "Those 14 soldiers were war heroes too. And they're dead because of him." Agent Kim's expression didn't change. "Mr. Patterson, I'm going to strongly advise you not to discuss this matter with anyone else, for your own protection. People who make unsubstantiated claims against intelligence. Officers sometimes find themselves in very difficult legal situations." I left the FBI office knowing I'd made a terrible mistake. I'd handed them the evidence, and they were going to bury it. Morrison was too valuable, too connected, too useful to the intelligence community. 14 dead soldiers were just the cost of doing business. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Henderson, about Rodriguez, about all the guys who'd never made it home. They deserved justice. They deserved the truth. So I called a reporter, Marcus Webb from the Washington Post, a guy who'd built his career exposing military corruption. I told him everything, sent him copies of the emails I'd kept, gave him enough information to start his own investigation. Webb was interested. Very interested. He said he'd start making calls, checking sources, verifying the story. He said if everything checked out, it would be front-page news. 2 days later, I got a visit from 2 men in dark suits. They didn't show badges, didn't identify themselves. They just walked into my apartment, like they owned it, and sat down at my kitchen table. "Mr. Patterson," the older one said, "we understand you've been making some concerning allegations about Major Morrison. Who are you?" "We're people who are very interested in protecting American national security. And right now, you're a threat to that security." The younger man opened a briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Brandon Patterson, age 26, honorably discharged from the Army in 2019, currently unemployed, receiving disability benefits for PTSD, history of depression, anxiety, substance abuse, 3 arrests for public intoxication in the past year. What? Does any of that have to do with "It paints a picture," the older man interrupted. A picture of a disturbed veteran, struggling with mental health issues, making wild accusations against his former commanding officer. A kind of person who might hack into government computer systems and fabricate evidence. I didn't fabricate anything. Of course you did. He pulled out another document. A psychiatric evaluation performed last week by Dr. Jennifer Walsh at the VA hospital. She concluded that you're suffering from severe paranoid delusions related to your military service. She's recommended immediate involuntary commitment. My blood turned to ice. I never saw any Dr. Walsh. No? Well, according to her report, you've been seeing her for months. She has detailed notes about your sessions, including your obsession with blaming others for the deaths of your unit. Very sad, really. I realized what was happening. They were setting me up, creating a paper trail that would discredit anything I said about Morrison, making me look like a crazy veteran with a grudge. The reporter, I said. Marcus Webb. I already told him everything. The younger man smiled. Mr. Webb called this morning. Seems he's decided not to pursue the story. Something about insufficient verification. He sends his apologies. They'd gotten to him, too. Somehow, they'd convinced or threatened Webb into dropping the investigation. Here's what's going to happen, the older man said, standing up. You're going to stop making allegations about Major Morrison. You're going to delete any copies of those emails you might have. And you're going to seek help for your obvious mental health issues. And if I don't, then tomorrow morning, you'll be arrested for computer fraud, espionage, and seditious conspiracy. You'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison. And your fellow inmates will be very interested to learn that you're a veteran who betrayed his country. They left without another word, but the message was clear. Morrison was untouchable. The system would protect him, no matter how many soldiers he'd killed. I spent the next week in a haze of anger and despair. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Henderson's face. Rodriguez screaming for help. Morrison standing there, calm as could be, while his friends bled out in the dirt. But I couldn't do anything about it. The emails were inadmissible. The reporter had been silenced. The FBI was compromised. Morrison was protected by layers of bureaucracy and national security classification that made him effectively immune from justice. It wasn't till I was cleaning out my closet, packing up my army gear to donate to Goodwill, that I found the answer. Hidden in the bottom of my old duffel bag was something I'd forgotten about, a small digital camera I'd carried during deployment. Standard issue for documenting mission details and potential evidence. I'd thought it was broken after the ambush, the lens cracked and the screen dark. But when I plugged it into my computer, it came to life. There were dozens of photos from our final patrol. Pictures of the convoy, the route, the valley where we'd been hit. And there, in the background of one image taken during our refuel stop, was Morrison. He was standing apart from the rest of us, his back turned, talking on what looked like a satellite phone. The timestamp showed the call was made exactly 15 minutes before the ambush began. 15 minutes. Just enough time for someone to relay our exact position to fighters waiting in the hills. But it was the expression on Morrison's face that made everything clear. He wasn't talking to headquarters. He wasn't calling for support. He was looking around nervously, like a man afraid of being overheard, like a man making a deal with the devil. I enhanced the image, adjusting the contrast and brightness until I could make out more details. In Morrison's free hand was what looked like a GPS device. He was reading coordinates off the screen, our coordinates. The exact location where 14 of my friends would die in less than 15 minutes. This was it. Proof that Morrison had made contact with someone immediately before the ambush. Evidence that couldn't be dismissed as fabricated emails or hacked accounts. A photograph taken on military equipment during an official operation. I called Agent Kim, told her I had new evidence. She agreed to meet me, but when I arrived at the FBI office, she wasn't alone. The two men in suits were waiting for me. "Mr. Patterson," the older one said, "I thought we had an understanding." "I have proof," I said, holding up the camera. A photograph of Morrison making a phone call right before the ambush. Agent Kim took the camera, examined the image, then handed it to the older man. He studied it for a moment, then did something that made my heart stop. He dropped the camera on the floor and crushed it under his heel. "What photograph?" he asked. "You can't do this." "There are backups. I uploaded everything to the cloud." "No," Agent Kim said, consulting her phone. "According to our cyber division, your cloud account was hacked this morning by foreign agents. All data was corrupted. Very unfortunate. They'd thought of everything. Every piece of evidence, every backup, every way I might prove Morrison's guilt. They'd systematically destroyed or discredited it all. Why?" I asked. "Why protect him? He's a traitor." "He's an asset," the older man said. "His contacts in the Taliban provide valuable intelligence. His willingness to sacrifice American lives makes him credible to our enemies. That credibility is worth more than a few dead soldiers." The words hit me like a physical blow. Morrison wasn't just a traitor, he was an active intelligence asset. The government knew what he'd done, and they were using him anyway. "You're all monsters," I whispered. "We're pragmatists," Agent Kim replied, "and you're a loose end." The younger man pulled out a syringe filled with clear liquid. "This will be quick. A veteran with PTSD, struggling with addiction, takes too many pills. Very sad, but not uncommon." I ran. I don't know how I made it out of that building, but I did. Sprinting through the streets of Denver, knowing they were right behind me, knowing there was nowhere to hide. I've been running for 6 months now. Living off the grid, paying cash for everything, never staying in one place too long. They want me to disappear, but I won't give them the satisfaction, Doc, so I'm writing this story. Posting it everywhere I can, sending it to every news outlet, every blogger, every social media platform that will take it. Maybe they'll discredit it as the ravings of a mentally ill veteran. Maybe they'll delete it as quickly as I can post it. But maybe, just maybe, someone will listen. Someone will investigate. Someone will ask why Major Morrison's career has been so successful. Why he's been promoted so quickly despite his unit. Suffering such heavy casualties. Henderson deserves that much. Rodriguez deserves that much. All 14 of them deserve to have their story told. Our lieutenant sold the coordinates. 14 of us died. And the government is protecting him because his betrayal makes him useful to them. That's the truth. They don't want you to know that sometimes the greatest enemies of American soldiers aren't foreign fighters in distant lands. Sometimes they're the officers giving the orders, the agents running the operations, the bureaucrats making the deals. Sometimes the enemy wears the same uniform you do. I don't know how much longer I can stay ahead of them, but I had to try. I had to tell someone what really happened in that valley in Afghanistan. What really happens when money is more important than loyalty, when intelligence assets are more valuable than soldiers' lives. Major Morrison is still out there, still betraying American troops, still getting paid for information that gets people killed. And the system that should be stopping him is protecting him instead, Dot. But now you know. Now someone else knows the truth about what happened to Bravo Company in the Kunar province. About how 14 American soldiers died, not for their country, but for their lieutenant's bank account. Remember their names. Remember their sacrifice. And remember that sometimes the greatest act of patriotism is exposing the traitors who wear the flag.